Hello and welcome to Gain3D's Business Development Marketing Podcast. Episode 1. In today's episode, we have guest Jeremiah Williams, the Chief Operating Officer of Fisher's Refrigeration. Talk about mindset, business development and growth strategies, and his journey on how he got to where he's at right now. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe so you can catch the next video. And we'll see you then.
Well, the economy is transitioning right now. It's transforming, really, to be honest. And it's opportunity. There's also a lot of room for concern. Um, so we can elaborate more. Well, I'll let you kind of guide me where you want to go.
Yeah, so I was, thinking just kind of start with your story. How'd you end up? Well, first, what's your position? Your title and what do you do? And then
Yeah, so it's a loose title. Chief Operating Officer kind of oversees a lot of different things. But I think the owner himself, or the owner and I are very close. He's a good friend of mine. I met him from a men's retreat about the time Maddie was born. So I would say that's what, 15 years ago. Wow, she turned 16 in January. So it was about 15 years ago. We met at a men's retreat through our Catholic church. And I use that very loosely now as well, because the older I get, the more I see the corruption through the church, like any organization has. Business, boards, like everybody feels like jockeying for positions. There's ulterior motives being played. It's a constant game of chess, no matter where you go. But I'm the operating officer here of an industrial refrigeration company. To be honest with you, I knew nothing about the industry, didn't know anything about the business. What I know is business in general. I love business. It's something that I followed for a long time. My grandfather owned a company. My dad owned a company. Your parents owned a company. Like I grew up around entrepreneurs.
yeah,
In hindsight, I think I probably wish I would have gone to college in pursuit of that. And college for me was just the way out of town, to be honest. To go with your brother, who's dear friend, and kind of figure it out. So, I had some challenging times there through growing up, but mainly it was just I was more frustrated than anything because I didn't understand why my family didn't have the typical dynamics that other families had. And so I think I probably was more resentful to my parents and, because they were young. And so when you're trying to figure things out and you see everybody else living a different way, you're like, man, why can't I have that?
yeah,
All I see is you hear the phrase all the time, money doesn't buy happiness. And I'll tell everybody, live without it and tell me you're happy.
yeah,
Not in America. That ain't going to happen. And so the reality is you need money. Our economy is built on that. And to accept anything less or to come up with some other coward response is just naive. And you're going to be end up left behind. Instead of realizing that the world is not going to give you anything, you have to earn it. And that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. In my case, I had swimming that taught me a lot. I think about just continuing forward no matter what the circumstance is. And so my parents always harped on going to college. Not so much my dad, but my mom was big on it. My grandparents were all big on it, but I had no intentions, to be honest with you, of going to college. It was your brother that talked me into it, and mom. But hindsight, best decision I ever made. I just wish I would have went with more intent focus on what it was I really wanted to pursue, and that's something that, as I'm raising children, I speak to them about on a regular basis. And everybody's like, well, why do you talk to him? Maddie's 16 or will be 16. Landon's 12. Max is 9. Why would a dad talk to his kids about that? Isn't that too early? My thought is no, because they need time to figure out what in the world they're going to do 10 years from now. And unless you're exploring those topics, you have no idea. You know, I had no idea that I wanted to be in business. I was going to go to be a teacher and a swim coach.
Yep. Yeah.
Until I
I went
found out.
for creative writing myself
Right.
and
So
ended up
you
in
kind of go
IT.
with this, the world can be whatever I make it. To some truth, that is true. But it's going to require a lot of work and a lot of humbling experiences and learning from failure. And really, at the core of it, that's what entrepreneurship is. You're hoping for the best. You have a plan, and we all know that life doesn't go according to plan. So, when I got to college and we getting through the general studies, me and your brother, and we're trying to figure out what in the world we're really going to do. He was going for journalism, I think, at the time, or maybe it was business. I
Yeah.
can't remember
No,
which.
he graduated with a journalism degree. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big reader. Um, I'm a skimmer. My ADHD, it's just one of these. You learn what you're good at and what you're not. I can skim read with the best of them. Honestly, I learned from life experiences, engaging with. I've always been a big believer. If you're the smartest or the best in your group, it's time for you to level up. And so I was blessed to grow up around a lot of successful people. And I knew that even though I was making a lot of mistakes at the time, that I was better than those mistakes. And you just have to hold yourself accountable, you know. Um, so as you get through, and I go back to college in the sense of what changed my plan was I didn't want to be broke. And when you look at what teachers get paid, no offense, they're underpaid by a
Mm-hmm.
mile. It should be one of the things that we change as an economy. If we want our population, step back for a moment. Our nation's in massive debt. What does that mean? That means people control our decision making because we owe them money, and you're not free until you don't owe anybody anything. Then you can make decisions of what you want, and ultimately, um, we have the way to get out of debt as a nation is to raise GDP, right? Because that's our revenue, and it is a business. And so I look at things pretty holistically in the sense of they need money. Again, it goes back to money doesn't buy happiness. Okay, if that's what you want to believe, when I pass you by in life and you're happy, I hope with where you're at, you only have yourself to blame because that's what you wanted. That's what you wanted to target. And if that's the world, don't point fingers at everybody else because they're working hard trying to advance their own life for whatever their ambitions are. Maybe they're greedy. Maybe they want to build families. Maybe they want to build businesses. It doesn't really matter. But it's not making up this fake facade of money doesn't buy happiness. I guess maybe if you lived in Fiji and you're a substance farmer, and yeah, you could probably be happy there.
Well,
But
you'd still need money.
you still need money. So ultimately, that's the conclusion I came to in college, which is why I went into business administration. Got into that by chance, mainly because the whole concept made sense to me that I could learn all the different pieces of the business that I would need to know to be able to run a business. Didn't grow up with money, so it made sense that I should pursue maybe a career in finance, which is how I landed at Wells Fargo, oddly enough. Was not intending to be there, but I had made some bozo decisions early on in my career that impacted my ability to do a sales role um, at the time. So I had a little too much partying, I would say, was going on at that time.
That's sort of the
And
salesman
so,
life, though, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah, you mean you're out networking, you're out, and things as a young person can get away from you pretty quick, and you can lose distortion of where you're focused on and how far you're going to put yourself back by, satisfying these more immediate needs versus being disciplined and sticking to what your plan was. And that was the problem is I didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
I was just kind of floating along and hanging out with everybody that I could and trying to figure things out in the business world. But the good Lord put me in a position to start a career at Wells Fargo. Didn't know what loans were. Didn't really know who Wells Fargo was at the time. Hindsight, best opportunity I could have been in, even though I was extremely unhappy. I think I was extremely unhappy later on, not so much early on, because then I started seeing the realities of the world. And by that I mean, you start learning about money, how it works, how credit works, and it's all these things that they don't teach you as a young person. Like you don't
Hmm.
get any of that they say they do, sure, with your government classes and can I bounce a checkbook? Sure, my 12-year-old bounces his checkbook. You know why? Because dad taught him how to do it early on because I had a career in finance and I know how important it is to understand how money works. And so I don't otherwise you're gonna be taking care of your kids forever. And I don't want to be that parent. And the reason I know that because I worked in banking for so long, I've watched families make all these mistakes. And I was like, I'm not gonna do that. So I learned how to manage my credit and build it up to be strong because with credit, you can start over at any time. No matter
Hmm.
where you are, if you have good credit, you can get loans, you can get what you need to start over. And so once I learned that, that was priority number one. Priority number two, my stepfather told me a long time ago, um, wealth is not having big houses and cars and flamboyant. Nobody cares about that. The mass population does because it's societal things, but
Yeah,
it's not wealth.
one thing that I remember hearing about that is, when you see a Ferrari driving down the road, all you know is that person is $200,000 less cash in the bank. That's all you know about them. You don't
Yeah,
know
but
if they've mortgaged that thing, if they can actually afford it, if so
I mean, look at the
it's
real
all
estate
about
agents,
vanity
right?
at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of them in your big cities are all going to be driving the Maseratis, the doctors, the attorneys, because it's part of that expectation. Um, doesn't mean they're happy. Doesn't mean that it's not financed. Now, in other cases, I know lots of people that it makes more sense to spend the money on doing that versus paying the government, and those are smart financial decisions. Like you, so there's a balance between the status quos and the people that are doing it because of they don't want to give their money to the government. And I don't blame them because our
Yep.
government's terrible with managing money. So I'm a big advocate of the money belongs back to the people, not to the government. Um, because they can be bought and paid for. And the more that there are of them, the more that they're reaching for handouts. And they don't care about the small person, at least not now. And that's the biggest transition I think that will have to happen over the next couple generations.
Yeah, I think.
And I think the mass population in general is open to the R and the D does not matter. They don't, they're all working on the same team.
Hmm.
And it wasn't designed that way, but the two-party system is not mandatory. I've spoken to many people that are like, oh, we have to have it. No, we don't. And until we wake up as a population and stand together as, citizens and say, no, we're done with this nonsense, um, things won't change. But it's getting bad enough now. I think that people are starting to get frustrated enough from all sides.
Hmm.
And it's, I think, opening the minds of what's possible and what the economy needs to do to change. And part of the reason I'm so fascinated by people like Elon is, and maybe I'm right about this assumption, maybe I'm not. But here's the way I see it all. How are you going to break corruption at the core of everything? What keeps corruption running? It's money. right?
Yep.
And as long as those same people can keep that system running with that money, it won't change. The only way that you can take that money away is to disrupt them. And now you take them. Now you can pay the politicians to do the right thing versus the wrong thing. And so if you look at the things that Elon's attacking, while it's slow and methodical, he's disrupting massive industries that are UAW,
Yep.
auto union, the auto companies, GM, Ford, whatever, oil and gas. Look how old these industries are and how they've not transformed their industries at all, but have paid to maintain them. Pharmaceuticals, right? Like the reason they're thriving is because they're paying the politicians to make the laws to work in their favor, right?
Yeah, and or past their drugs.
Doesn't matter. Whatever your initiative is, and I can't say that it's wrong, because at the end of the day, if you're the leader of the company and you have shareholders and you have employees, your number one obligation is to those people, right? And so if you know your competition is going to be doing it, you're going to do it too. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I have a role and a responsibility. I get paid a lot of money to do that. People can call me what it is. If you don't like that role, don't do it. Somebody else will.
Yep.
So you want to leave that $26 million on the table plus $100 million of stock options? I'm not so sure that any person that has that opportunity isn't doing that. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. I'm not a judge. I just look at things very holistically of what is our current system and structure. So I follow these leaders, and it's how I put my own plans together from my small business that I work for here. And, you know, to kind of tie these things back in. So I had a conversation. I worked for a very large company. Well, we'll step it back. We'll start back at Wells Fargo, Fortune 50 company, right? Elite. They micromanage. They do things to a T. And I honestly say that all the things that allow me to do a job today are all the fundamentals I learned at Wells Fargo. I don't want to build our ecosystem that way, and I'm not going to, which is the fun part of being an entrepreneur or an operations person. Anybody that has power and influence over an organization to build the culture in a way that you see is best for your people.
Yep.
But I cannot take away the fact that the amount of discipline and execution it requires does take 40 or 50 or 60 years for an organization to go from where Wells Fargo was to where it is today. Chase, you know, that was my secondary helm for there for a couple of years, and I loved that role. It's a completely different role. At the time, I was a private client banker. Most of my clients were entrepreneurs, very successful, very wealthy entrepreneurs. So I took full advantage of that time and not having to manage people, but just manage my relationships with our clients. And in doing that, I learned a lot about small business in general and all the different ways to do things and how to, if I'm going to do this is the human behavior that I should expect in return. And so you really almost lose the track of the business and you focus on the people, because in turn, if you focus on the people, the business is going to thrive.
Yep.
Right. And you have to differentiate yourself from everybody else. And I'll never forget it. Early on at Wells Fargo, I was complaining because our rates were never the cheapest. And I had a manager, John Lobs, to this day. And I think he said to me, J-Dubs, if they're not willing to travel an hour and a half to come and do with you, even though the rate is a quarter of them well enough, you didn't help them understand what it is that we're offering and that we're not going to be the cheapest rate. But the people that are the cheapest rate don't have you. They don't have your experience. They don't have your knowledge of what's best for them financially. And that's on you if you didn't make that right in their face enough. And that really took me back. That's where I think I changed my mindset of what I wanted to accomplish in sales was I can't be like I was never gonna be successful selling rate. I had to sell myself and the company I worked for. And once I learned how to do that, game over. I think I was probably 6 or 8 months into the company at that point. From that point on, I quickly moved to the top of the ranks in my region, which included 7 or 8 states, but I was consistently number 1 to 3 every month because I knew how to connect with my customer base. I didn't waste time, and I had all the stats. I knew how many phone calls I needed to make a day, and I was constantly looking to improve my numbers every week, every month, every year. No matter if I was the best or not, didn't matter. I needed to get better always. And I think anybody that's going to be successful in life, that has to be your mentality. Otherwise, you're going to get beat by people like me because I'm never done looking for more. And I think that's probably been the biggest challenge is I've come into this company, smaller company. I've worked for trillion-dollar companies. I've worked for billion-dollar companies, and they're very different. They're all very different in the way that they operate. And you might think a $3 billion company is a big company. But when I got there and I looked at how their operations, they're like, man, you're so smart. And I'm like, everybody that I just left and was working with would be doing the same thing if they were here. You guys are just so far behind in disciplined operations. And then at that point, I was like, now I understand why it takes companies 30 or 40 years to get to where they are. There's a lot of backroom stuff that's going on, right? Like you have to have a lot of things that go right in that path, but it takes a long time to get a company and an organization to turn what it's used to where it needs to go.
And part of that's legacy people in place too.
Yeah, pride, being humble.
Those people got to be willing to change and agree to the change instead of put their foot down and make those changes almost impossible.
I mean, I'll be honest, I ate a lot of humble pie from the time I left college until I was in my late 30s. Things I thought I knew, I was confident in it because I had done it this way before, didn't work in their culture. And I had to step back and humble myself and say, all right, you're seeing the landscape wrong. And I'm grateful for all those experiences and having great leaders to correct me. But it also required me to be able to say, you know what, you're right. Right? A lot of people won't do that. I preach it to my kids constantly. Own your mistakes. It's okay. That's what's going to make you better. Not putting your head in the sand and ignoring it and say, well, they're wrong.
Yep.
They may be wrong right now, but you got to get them over to buy into what where you're trying to take them, and then they'll follow you. But you coming in saying you need to do this and you need to do this, we need to do that. Wrong approach. Any team you're going to come into is going to reject that. So, and depending on what size of company, the maturity level is different. In a $1 trillion company, it was very black and white. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We have a line of people waiting to take your job.
Yep.
And they were right. And I knew they were right. So no whining, no complaining. They work out the week. It's almost like the military. By the time you make it to special forces, you've weeded out the week, right? Those soldiers are going to do whatever you ask them to do because that is their focus. That's what they've been trained to do, and they're going to execute it that level, no matter what. Corporate America is very much the same way. When I went from Wells Fargo, man, very strict. You couldn't swear anywhere. You had to be nervous about offending people constantly. It was a very unfulfilling life professionally. But honestly, I looked at it as when I left more of a college experience, what real students should be getting in the real world to be able to come in and contribute
Yeah.
in a meaningful way to an organization. And most of the organizations out there need it. And I think a lot of companies are starting to realize, I mean, I saw it at Lippert when I was there. They were hiring from outside. They were no longer just promoting from within
Mm-hmm.
because the culture needed to change.
Yeah, you need to bring in new talent, fresh ideas sometimes.
Yeah, and you've got to be open to, as a leader, you have to be open to what it means bringing that. And so I speak about that mainly just because when I came here to Fisher, where I am today, we were a $12 million company when I came in. And I had a conversation early on with my friend just to make sure that we were clear on expectations, that I wasn't leaving a $120 million operation to come and run a $12 million company and be satisfied with the pay that I was going to get. And I'm being paid more than I ever have in my life. But I'm at a point in my life, I don't care about that no more. It's got to be about, like, I know the way my body works, the way my head works, and I'm going to be constantly looking for better, more. How do I do more with less? And I
Mm-hmm.
need to, and I want my people learning those things because when I'm gone, I want it to continue to run and evolve in its own organic form. But most leaders in businesses or founders of organizations are so egotistical, they won't change. Even if they want to, they don't know how. They've never worked anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
They've never had to compete at a high level against peers in their own organization willing to take their jobs. And that's really what big business taught me was, for me, I thrived in that environment because I grew up in swimming, right? It's always get better. I didn't need my coach to tell me I wasn't performing. The clock told me every
Yeah.
time I hit the wall. What I needed from my coaches was how was I breathing? How was my stroke? How are, and these are the drills we're going to change and work on to improve those numbers. And so I've always had that mindset of like, I'm never satisfied. I'll never be satisfied. I don't care if I'm 80 years old, I'm going to have goals of what I want to get out of my life before I die. And so there are people that want that, and there are people that don't want that, and it's up to the leader to know who their people are. That's your family. But there are a lot of people that just treat them as numbers. And I saw that right away, kind of when I got here, that Ray doesn't treat people like numbers. But he wasn't focused on their personal development. It was more of, what do I need to run the business day to day to meet my customers' needs? Versus, I need to educate my workforce to feel the same way that I feel, to see things the way that I see them. And that requires coaching. And there's a big difference from founders being bosses and owners versus being coaches. And I'm a big advocate of, I'm not your boss, I'm a coach. I've seen all these different businesses, I've seen all these different ways to do things. There's not one way to do something. And you're really doing the human a disservice by focusing them to that actual role instead of building the role around what their skill sets are. And that's the coach's job, to take the players you got and to figure out how to win. And I think most founders in America right now, what you're going to see is that they don't know how to coach. They think they do. And because they hang out with other like-minded people that are also founders. And they haven't had to work in real competition. Their competition is their employer or the companies they're competing against. But they're not building the competition in their own home to celebrate those people that are coming up and thriving. And I told Ray when I came to the company a long time ago that I'll be done with my work when I'm done growing the company for the people that deserve the opportunity to step up, to level up. The pressure should come from the bottom foundation of your workforce and press leadership to grow the company so that they get opportunities to make more money and provide better lives for their family. And in doing so, they're going to continue that push because it's a system of growth. And it's important for everybody to understand. And I try to tell people this all the time. The big difference that I saw from going from companies like Wells Fargo to $1 billion company to a $12 million company is about expectations, right?
Yep.
And you never took a promotion at Wells Fargo unless you knew you could do the job because there's no going backwards. You could have been with the company 12 years. You take that promotion and you underperform, you're not going backwards. You're being graduated from an employee to a customer. And life will start over somewhere else. Where when I went to $1 billion company, they demoted people all the time and kept their pay the same. And I'm like, well, anybody can do that. Why would I not want to do that if I was an employee? That sets the wrong standard. Like, I have less responsibilities and you didn't take my money away. Cool. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like that's what cowards do. You're not a real business leader. You call yourself one, but you're really not because you're not managing the business. You're not managing the financials. You're not making sure that the other people that work for the company are being provided for because you're being the leader you need to be for the company. And that means that person that you're demoting probably isn't going to like you very much. But they need that because they're either going to get better or they're going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of different ways to do things. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't demote people and do whatever. Maybe they got promoted from your mistake because you promoted them too early. That's on you as the coach. Don't put that on them. You should always look at yourself first. If they're not getting the information, you should hold yourself, James Mangold, district manager, he's president now somewhere. Look at yourself first. If your people aren't getting the information that they need, it's the way you're communicating to them, and you need to find a way to connect. Hold yourself accountable. And I don't think enough leaders do that. They think they do, but they don't. And I can say that because I've worked in all the spectrums. I love change. I'm never going to stay consistent because if you're consistent, you're either dying or you need to go forward. You can't flatline in business. You
Yep.
either have to be better or you're dying a slow death. You may not see it right away, but it will catch you. Your peers will catch you eventually. And so I think that's the biggest thing that if I can advise people, and I just had a young person come and talk with me the other day asking me, what should I focus on in school? She's in college right now for business administration. Take psychology, understand people, how they think, and celebrate that. Because that'll be what beats your competition. They're going to try to make everybody conform. They're going to try to be dictators. Henry Ford proved a long time ago that doesn't work. And yet people are just, like trying to reinvent the wheel. Like he knew it back 60 years ago.
Yep.
And now his company and others are going to die a slow death because they got away from those fundamental values. That's what I love about business.
Awesome. Well, we only got a couple minutes left. Yep. So any last thoughts you want to wrap up with? And
no, I encourage more people to go to college with intent and look for life experiences. And when you're the smartest one in the room, it's time for you to level up.
Yep.
You need to go be uncomfortable again for a while and learn as much as you can. Never be done learning. And follow those like Elon. I mean, with the way the internet is now, you can find great leaders everywhere at all different spectrums.
Yeah, and
put your own
as
spin on it.
mentors.
Yeah, you have to be an entrepreneur. Take your skill set, elevate, and don't be ashamed of who you are. You know, it may work, it may not, but what's the fun in not trying? You know,
Yep, definitely. Well,
just like you are.
yeah. Yep, I keep trying. Well, one of these will stick.
It's in your DNA, bud. You guys are all entrepreneurs, so
Yeah, I mean,
um,
even mom's dad owned a business, so
there's something to be said about it, right? It's not easy. If it was, anybody could do it. It's
yeah.
just to be successful at it. You got to surround yourself with successful people that are smarter and better than you. Learn what they do, what you don't like about it, put your own spin on it, and keep looking forward always.
Well, thanks for joining me for the first episode of Gain3D Marketing's Business Development Podcast.
Very cool.
Really,
I'm stoked for you.
yeah, I appreciate it. And I will sign off now to all the viewers. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for the next video next week.